So I don't know if you can see this, Grady. We're talking about Confucius and philosophy. And we're saying philosophy is love of wisdom. Whoops, not window. Wisdom.
Love of wisdom. I love windows.
Love of wisdom. So we're going to watch this short video on Confucius.
Woohoo! Woohoo!
And then we're going to talk about what Confucius stood for, or you should know after watching this video, okay? You should know about him. Some of you already know some stuff, that's great. So let's make sure we get all the stuff we want to know. And then we're going to give you a possible bonus project if you want to earn up to 10 bonus points.
Oh yeah.
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
No.
Oh yeah. Duck man. Oh yeah.
Duck man, come on, Kool-Aid.
Can we turn on the other lights?
Duck man.
Oh yeah.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Kool-Aid. Oh yeah.
Might be a good time to add to your notes.
That's me.
Most people recognize his name and know that he is famous for having said something. But considering the long-lasting impact his teachings have had on the world, very few people know who Confucius really was, what he really said, and why. Amid the chaos of 6th century BCE China, where warring states fought endlessly among themselves for supremacy, and rulers were frequently assassinated, sometimes by their own relatives, Confucius exemplified benevolence and integrity, and through his teaching became one of China's greatest philosophers. Born to a nobleman but raised in poverty from a very young age following the untimely death of his father, Confucius developed what would become a lifelong sympathy for the suffering of the common people. Barely supporting his mother and disabled brother as a herder, an account keeper at a granary, and with other odd jobs, it was only with the help of a wealthy friend that Confucius was able to study at the Royal Archives, where his worldview would be formed. Though the ancient texts there were regarded by some as irrelevant relics of the past, Confucius was inspired by them. Through study and reflection, Confucius came to believe that human character is formed in the family and by education in ritual, literature, and history. A person cultivated in this way works to help others, guiding them by moral inspiration rather than brute force. To put his philosophy into practice, Confucius became an advisor to the ruler of his home state of Lu. But after another state sent Lu's ruler a troupe of dancing girls as a present, and the ruler ignored his duties while enjoying the girls in private, Confucius resigned in disgust. He then spent the next few years traveling from state to state, trying to find a worthy ruler to serve, while holding fast to his principles. It wasn't easy. In accordance with his philosophy, and contrary to the practice of the time, Confucius dissuaded rulers from relying on harsh punishments and military power to govern their lands, because he believed that a good ruler inspires others to spontaneously follow him by virtue of his ethical charisma. Confucius also believed that because the love and respect we learn in the family are fundamental to all other virtues, personal duties to family sometimes supersede obligations to the state. So when one duke bragged that his subjects were so upright that a son testified against his own father when his father stole a sheep, Confucius informed the duke that genuinely upright fathers and sons protected one another. During his travels, Confucius almost starved. He was briefly imprisoned, and his life was threatened at several points. But he was not bitter. Confucius had faith that heaven had a plan for the world, and he taught that a virtuous person could always find joy in learning and music. Failing to find the ruler he sought, Confucius returned to Lu and became a teacher and philosopher so influential that he helped shape Chinese culture, and we recognize his name worldwide, even today. For the disciples of Confucius, he was the living embodiment of a sage who leads others through his virtue, and they recorded his sayings, which eventually were edited into a book we know in English as the Analects. Today, millions of people worldwide adhere to the principles of Confucianism, and though the precise meaning of his words has been debated for millennia, when asked to summarize his teachings in a single phrase, Confucius himself said, "Do not inflict upon others that which you yourself would not want." 2,500 years later, it's still sage advice.
What do we call that? That last saying.
Confucianism.
Confusion.
What's that last saying called?
The golden rule.
Isaiah?
The golden rule.
The golden rule. So we see some similarities between Confucianism and what?
Christianity.
They our own faith, right? Let's look at some other ones of his sayings. Is that 4 there?
It's 3. Yeah, I only have 3.
That's back, right?
Right.
Is this where they got the word Confucianism?
Confusion.
So we're going to look at this side first. Okay? For thousands of years, China has been shaped by the values of family, loyalty, hard work. A major influence has been Confucius, a philosopher and teacher born in 551 BC. In the hope of preventing wars, Confucius taught that kindness and respect in the family formed the foundation of a peaceful society. Confucius stressed that rulers are also obligated to be honest and fair. The passages below are some of Confucius's teachings that his students later wrote down. How do these teachings still relate to life today? So who wants to do one of these sayings, then interpret it for us? Luke.
Where are they saying?
Having,
What?
read the first saying there.
Having only tourists food to eat, plain water to drink. Is that it?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. And the friends arms swept below. One can still find happiness there. Riches and honor acquired by unrighteousness needed are to move as different cause.
So what is he saying there?
Like, you don't have to have everything to be like a good person.
wants to do another one? Ava.
Those who know the truth are not up to those who love it. Those who love the truth are not up to those who delight in it. I don't really understand it.
Does anybody understand that?
Just because other people have something, you have something too.
It's kind of what we were talking about in religion yesterday.
I'm confused by my own words.
Knowing something just means what?
You know it. But
So, truth. How many people know what truth is?
I think I do. I hope I do.
So we could just look up the definition, right?
Yeah.
The opposite of false, or being honest in what you say. But he's saying knowing it is not equal to, it's not even up to people that what?
Do it.
Love truth. And if you love truth, that's better than knowing truth. But the best is what? Delighting in it. That means this becomes part of your life. Okay? Who wants to do another one? Mary.
By nature, man is pretty much like they learn and practice that something about. So basically, what all life is just that way. You can really
Okay. Who wants to do the next one?
Shall I teach you what knowledge is? When you know a thing, say that you know it. When you do not know a thing, admit that you do not know it. That is knowledge. I think that means say the truth. Use common sense.
How many people in here are ignorant?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, okay. It means like
Okay?
like
Ignorant?
annoying, right?
So if you don't raise your hand,
No, stupid.
you're demonstrating it. Okay?
Oh.
Because ignorant just means what?
Stupid.
Not admitting something.
Lack
Of knowledge.
of knowledge.
I was listening. I'm spelling words backwards, so I'm doing very good. I'm very ignorant.
That's why we're here, right?
Yeah, so we can learn more.
Unless you know everything,
I don't think I do.
which nobody does. And if you think you know everything, you're demonstrating what?
Ignorance.
You're ignorant.
Not like I was.
Only God knows everything.
This is good.
Okay?
I'm
Who wants to do the next one? Let's get some other volunteers. Let's get some random volunteers.
I'm Randa.
Let's get a random volunteer that we haven't heard from. Let's get Celine, and then Aiden, and then
James.
Maddie P.
And then James.
Okay? So, Celine is first. Read the next one.
Whose king asked, is there any one word that can serve as a principle for the conduct of life? Confucius said, perhaps the word reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
Reciprocity. Okay. Do not do to others what you would not want others to do to you.
That's
So what's that mean to you?
the golden.
The golden rule, basically.
Okay. That one's pretty self-explanatory, right? So those of you that are ignoring me, would you want people to ignore you? That means
I mean,
what?
It depends. Or like
What's that mean then?
Work
That means you shouldn't be ignoring me, right? Because you wouldn't want to be ignored.
I makes the world blind.
Okay, who was next?
I was. The gentleman first practices what he preaches and then preaches what he practices. So always practice before you do something.
St. Augustine said, spread the good news, and if necessary, use words. That means if you want people to know you're a Christian, the first thing you have to do is what? You got to show them by your actions that you're a Christian. Same as Confucius is saying here, right? Okay, next.
So did he live by his saying?
Gentleman understands what is right. The inferior man understands what is profitable.
Spirit calls him inferior. I think.
Like some people don't really care about how others feel.
What does profitable mean?
Moneyful.
So it's like
Ooh
saying,
la.
if it's profitable, it's saying, what's in it for me? So Confucius is saying, you should be less concerned about what's in it for me, and more concerned about what? What's the right thing to
What
do
am I
here?
doing?
Okay, what's the right thing to do?
That's
The gentleman makes demands on himself, the inferior makes demands on others. A government is good when those near are happy and those far off are attracted. What's that mean? Barry?
Like, make others happy.
So if you have a good government, then the countries around you, what? They want to go to your country, or at least they want their government to become like your government. So, let's flip on the other side. There's a few more here. You need to know the name of that book, so it's in writing up there. You might highlight it or put it down in your notes. What's the name of his book? He didn't actually write this and say, this is going to be my book. Basically, his followers took all his sayings and they put them together into a book. Matt?
The teachings of Confucius.
Yeah, what's the name of the book?
The Analect.
Okay, the Analects, okay? Now again, these page numbers don't match up, I don't believe, with your book. Let's double check. Who can find the section on Confucius in your book first?
Got it. Have it.
Yeah, just so
Oh yeah, it does have it. It has China, but not.
It's right here.
Okay, 169. So the page numbers are different.
Got it. But they're close.
Okay? So I'm going to read through these and see if we can answer the questions. Daily I examine myself on 3 points. Have I worked hard? Have I been loyal to my friends? And have I shared what I have learned? Do not worry about having an important job. Worry about doing your job well. The good person is satisfied and calm. The mean person is always full of distress. When you see good and kind people, we should think of following their example. When we see criminal and greedy people, we should look at ourselves. So according to Confucius, what are the traits of a good person?
Good and kind. And calm and satisfied.
Respectful.
The Alpha.
Those of you drawing sketches and not tuning in to me, it's going to go in the booty drawer. And my booty drawer is already overflowing with stuff. So who has an answer to number one? Because if we don't have answers and discussing here, guess what? It's going to be homework
We're going to
instead.
be put in booty drawer.
Aiden.
A good person is satisfied and calm.
Okay, what else?
Kind.
Kind. What else? Anything else?
Just say good.
Loyal.
Okay, loyal to your friends. What's the traits of a good worker?
Hard work.
Doing their job well.
Doing their job well. What else?
Hard work.
Working hard. Would we have any problem with these teachings? In fact, a lot of these teachings are found what?
The Bible.
In the Bible. So what makes Christianity different than Confucianism then? Well, let's go ahead and finish this before we answer that question. 3, what did Confucius mean when he advised people to think of themselves when they saw a criminal or greedy person?
You're not like them.
See if they were being greedy.
Okay? We have a scripture passage that relates to that. Anybody think of that one? Before you take the sliver out of a person's eye, take what? Take the board or plank out of yours. In fact, so quit judging other people and do what? Look at yourself. That's what he's saying. Quit judging other people. That'd be a short way of saying it. And number 4, how did Confucian ideas influence the Han Dynasty? Well, we're going to find out that it dominated the Han Dynasty, and the rules of that dynasty became rules of Confucius. Now, let's look at some of the principles of Confucianism, the key principles. First principle we've already talked about is the golden rule. That means what? Treat others the way you want to be treated. Okay? Second principle, relationships. Are key to living. And Confucius had 4 relationships that were most important. Or 5, excuse me. Between a ruler and the subject, between a father and a son, between a husband and a wife, between brothers, and between friends. He's saying if all those relationships are working right, what's going to happen?
You're fine.
We're going to have a happy life and peace is going to rule. But if one of those relationships doesn't work right, then we got problems. Okay, another key principle had to do with the middle way. We had this in India too. Okay? The middle way. Who remembers what this means?
Don't go to extreme.
Don't go to the extreme.
Okay, don't go to extremes. Or a short word for that is what?
Karma?
Short word for that is called moderation. We have a virtue in our faith. You know what that virtue is called? It's called temperance. The virtue of temperance means don't go to extremes. Okay? And then he's saying good government depends on what?
People?
You.
The rule?
Peace.
Depends on good rulers. That means the character of the ruler, not whether they're really smart or not.
Well, it's
So you know what's the more important thing? Is not to learn about these social studies principles. The most important thing would be to live out this pledge. So if everybody left St. Joseph's School and lived out this pledge, I would say we have succeeded as a school. Even if you never learned any social studies. But that's impossible because I know as you are doing your best, you're what? You're gonna learn, okay? So then he said we should have respect for who? Well, everyone, but particularly respect for your ancestors. What's an ancestor?
Your family that's come before you.
The family that passed.
So the people that lived before you.
Basically like your great.
And his last thing was to be concerned about life on this earth. Not so very little concern about the afterlife. And here we're going to see this is one of the differences with our faith. Okay? There's two major differences. We can see a lot of things similar between Confucianism and Christianity. This one isn't, right? Would Christianity have any problem with these other ones? No. In fact, they're part of our scriptures, part of our teachings, part of what we do. Even though we wouldn't even necessarily be concerned about this, except that what? We really shouldn't be so much concerned about the afterlife if we're doing what? Or if we've done what we're supposed to do. But here's the biggest difference. Confucius says the way you get to become a good person is how?
Yourself.
You do it yourself. Christianity says the way that you become a good person is how? What's our theme? We could rephrase the theme and said, we could say, I can't do things, good things, without what? Without Christ, who strengthens me. This is the biggest difference. Confucius says, you can do these things through your own effort. Christianity says, we can only do these things how? With Christ. Without Christ, we can't do these things. This is the biggest difference, and it's a key difference. So when somebody talks about, well, what's the difference between Christianity and some of the, even Hinduism? There are many principles of Hinduism we would agree with. But again, Hinduism says the way you get to nirvana is by what?
Reincarnation, following the rules.
Following all these rules. Following the Dharma, and then get reborn again until you get it right. And then you'll get there. To heaven. How do we get to heaven?
Follow the rules.
Believe in God.
We listen to God. Follow God.
How do you get to heaven?
Listening to God.
This would be a basis of your faith. How do we get to heaven?
We believe in God.
Follow the 10
Trust Him.
Okay, we have to believe and repent of ourselves. We can't do anything on our own. So doing the good things, that's not how we get to heaven. We do the good things because we've done what? Why do you do the good things?
Because we know we're good. Because it's the right thing to do.
We do the good things because Christ is in us. We've accepted Christ into our lives. If you accept Christ into your life, you're compelled to do good things. See, sometimes we get it backwards. We get it like this. We think we got to do good things to what? Get to heaven. Christ is if we could earn our way into heaven, then it was stupid for God to do this. Right? If he didn't have to do this, if there's some way that I could earn my way in, this was stupid for him to do. But there's no way I could do anything that's going to get me into heaven because I'm too much of a sinner. I needed somebody to come and save me. And this is the biggest difference between Confucianism and the other one in this chapter is Lao Tzu. Sometimes it's called Taoism, spelled this way, and sometimes they spell it this way. It means the same way. I don't know how your book spelled it, but this is the philosopher that came up with this one, Lao Tzu. Okay? That's in the reading, right? You read about him, or did I sign
No,
that?
not yet.
171? Okay. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah, we did.
You should have read about him. Should have been one of your notes. So how was his philosophy? Who did read it? Who read about Taoism? What's his philosophy all about?
I didn't take notes on it.
The dial,
I take notes.
And what's the Tao, basically?
the guiding force of all reality.
So he's saying live in harmony with nature, basically.
What, we're supposed to do this?
So a Taoist will go do what? Yeah, they'll go out and isolate themselves in nature and learn how to live in peace and harmony with their surroundings. So these two philosophers, and we still have people that do this today, so that means this is a what? Contribution. Do we still have people doing this today? Yes, so that's a contribution from ancient China. And they still influence our culture today. For sure, they influence Asian culture. So throughout the China and Korea and Japan, you're going to see influences of Confucianism in there. Okay, and some people would say these really aren't religions. They're more like philosophies, but I'm going to group them either or. So we can call them religions because they're based on what? They're based on certain beliefs, right? What's the difference, though? Why some people not consider this a religion?
Because it doesn't have a God.
There's not really a God in Confucianism.
There's no power for it.
Okay?
During this chapter, it's about the video on Chinese warrior monk. Chinese what? Chinese warrior monk.
That sounds interesting.
Here's your bonus opportunity, if you want. Okay? Is you can create a Confucius poster.
You get to draw him?
Okay?
What do you mean?
So you're going to create a saying, either one of Confucius' sayings or one of your own. Basically, Confucius' sayings are only basically things that make you what?
Think.
Think. And give a statement about life. So even my funny one, I said, he who stands on pot, or what was it?
He who's high on pot.
He who gets high on pot falls in the toilet. Made a person what? Made you think about, oh, you're on a toilet, and if you get too high on it, you're going to fall into the toilet. Or some people are thinking high on pot means what? Drugs. And then you're going to the toilet. So it kind of has a double meaning there. Did Confucius say that? No, Confucius didn't say that. So everybody, if you're going to do this, on your poster, it's got to be on a sheet of, like a Google document or a Google drawing, that size of paper, or just a copy paper if you want to draw it yourself. Okay? The size of the handout I have right here for you. So this is the size, okay? just a copy paper. So you're making it that big. And everybody, if you're going to do this, you have to have these words on it. Confucius says, quotation, with a colon. And then you're going to put your saying, and of course you're going to put your saying in quotes. Then, you're going to have at least two pictures. Two pictures that relate to your saying. Okay? And then your name is in the bottom right-hand corner. First name only. Unless you're married. Or married. And first initial of your last name. Does everybody understand this? You don't have to do this.
So just one saying?
But it's a bonus. You can do a bonus, and I need to have it before break.
Okay. Can you put like all the stuff that you said about it?
No. Unless I already have. I might have already have. So you can go look up a Confucius saying. I don't want you to pick one of these. Okay? You got to pick one that we haven't read already. That isn't in your book or in on the sheet. Or you can make one up. You can just go and do a search of wise sayings. And it could be a Confucius saying.
Gets high on good sugar.
Okay?
Can you do a funny one?
He who gets high on wacky tobacco.
You can do a funny one if you want. If it makes you what? Think. That's what a philosopher does. He makes you think. Does anybody have a question then? Isaiah. Yes, you can turn it in online.
Does this make you think, Mr. Hale? Is water wet?
Is water wet does not make you think. No. These aren't questions, okay? These are what? These are a saying. That means it's a sentence. It's not a question. Okay, now, the other assignment. What was number 4? What's the question?
Did the bell already ring? The first bell?
Yeah, the first bell rang.
They were governed by his principles.
That's going to be the best part I've ever seen.
Read.